All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Ashley Rumschlag. I'm the VP of Digital Services at domesticshelters.org and Teresa's Fund. I'm joined today by Rachel Myers, our Digital Services Specialist, and Hannah Craig, our Senior Content Strategist and Creator, who will be monitoring the chat and Q&A today. So we're so excited today to hear from Dr. Carol Ann Peterson to learn about leadership. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All right, so live closed captionings are available for this webinar. To enable, please click More in the menu bar and select Show Subtitle. A transcript will also be available for the presentation within 1 week. And just a reminder then, all attendees are in listen-only mode, so your mic and your camera are turned off. If you have a question for the presenter, please enter that in the Q&A box, not the chat box. We prefer the chat box to be used to communicate between attendees or to let us know if there's any issues with the webinar. A certificate, transcript, recording, and any other resources that are referenced throughout the presentation will be emailed to all in attendance within the next week. We do remind anyone who is a call-in listener, please email me, Ashley at domesticshelters.org, just to send me your email address and I'll add you to that distribution list. Just a quick reminder about domesticshelters.org. We hope everyone knows about our website and uses the resource to share articles and tools and other resources with victims and survivors and your teammates. But just a reminder that we are one of the fastest growing online resources for domestic violence information. And we help millions of people every year get the answers that they need about domestic violence. We also have our searchable database of over 2,800 programs and resources throughout the US and Canada. Most of the people here, I know, attending today do have a listing on our website. So we encourage you and your team to make sure that that listing and information is up to date. And if you have any questions about how to do that, you can reach out to us directly at either directly to me, Ashley at domesticshelters.org, or our general email at info@domesticshelters.org. And next slide, just the same reminder, just of making sure that your information is up to date on the website. And then also a reminder that our US-based shelters are able to set up a free wish list on our website. And what that does, it allows donors from anywhere in the world to visit your wish list link, your unique wish list link, shop for items, put them in the cart, check out, and they magically appear at your preferred shipping address within 2 or 3 days. And don't forget about our Facebook professional community. So we do have an online Facebook group. Rachel will drop a link to that in the chat box. Please go ahead and join that. We look for that to be a place where people can, connect, share ideas, ask questions, kind of work together, because we all know that the more we work together, the more survivors that we can help. Again, questions, there's our email address, info@domesticshelters.org. If you have questions, anything that are related to what I shared today or anything else, please do reach out to us. And just a reminder, our next webinar is coming up on October 14th. We're going to be talking about recognizing and responding to stalking. That's going to be with Dana Flightman of the Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center. And we have a link to that in the chat if you'd like to get signed up to attend our next webinar. And one more favorite ask of everyone, we encourage everyone to follow us on YouTube. That is where we put all of these videos in addition to our website. So if you want to get notified as soon as our content's available, please do follow us on YouTube. All right, and with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our presenter for today. Dr. Carol Ann Peterson is a full-time lecturer at the University of Southern California and joined the School of Social Work in January of 2004, where she teaches courses on domestic violence, leadership, diversity, policy and advocacy, and global violence against women. Her recent published book is Interpersonal Aggression and Complexities of Domestic Violence and Intimate Partner Abuse. She was certified national expert witness on strangulation prevention. She was appointed to the Los Angeles Mayor's Domestic Violence Steering Committee, as well as a consultant of the Joint Domestic Violence Project between Tel Aviv, Israel, and Los Angeles. Dr. Peterson has done trainings for the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which is part of Homeland Security, where they train rural law enforcement officers and domestic violence advocates to be trainers in their own communities. She has also done trainings for domestic violence shelter staff, corporate America, and nonprofit organizations, consulted with the U.S. Attorney General's Office and the California Attorney General's Office and the Los Angeles Attorney General Office on cases, has done case reviews. Additionally, Dr. Peterson is a team advisor / trainer for the statewide domestic violence medical training team, developed curriculum to teach medical personnel to recognize and treat survivors of domestic violence. So she has done a lot. And I met Carol Ann at the End Violence Against Women conference back in April. And I was just so impressed by everything that she had done, and especially her recent book on intimate partner violence. So I have been patiently waiting for this presentation, and I'm so glad to have Dr. Peterson with us today. So Dr. Peterson, welcome. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you. And I was looking at everybody checking in. And so good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, since you're all across the country, which I appreciate and thank you very much. So Ashley, should I just go ahead and pull up my slides?
Please do. And then did you want to go ahead? I know we chatted about doing a quick poll.
Yes.
So everyone here, I'm going to pull up a poll while we kind of transition our slides over to Dr. Peterson's. And what this poll is we're going to talk about obviously leadership today. So we wanted to get a sense of different leadership traits and how important everyone kind of feels that they are. So I went ahead and launched the poll, and I'll read through each of the questions. There's 6 separate ones. They're all kind of the same, but they focus on different traits. So the first question is, how important do you think being ethical is to being a good leader? So 5 being the most important and 1 being the least important. So the first one is being ethical. The second question, how important do you think integrity is to being a good leader? And then the third question, what about honesty? How important that is to being a good leader? Again, it's 5 is most important and 1 is least important. So then the next question is being a good communicator. How important is that? Number 5 is creativity. How important is creativity to being a good leader? And our last question is accountability. How important do you think accountability is to being a good leader? So we'll give everyone a chance to weigh in on these questions. We'll look to see, we have over half participation right now, so we'll give everyone just a few more moments here to weigh in on that. I see you've got your slides pulled up there. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I'll just run through the answers real quick so everyone kind of get a sense. Actually, I'll hit share results. I know that our call-in listeners and our listeners on Facebook Live aren't able to see these results, so I'll just kind of give you a sense of what how the responses ended up. When it came to being ethical, really in that most people said 5. So most important, about 87%, and about 12% said 4. So kind of putting that in definitely the top tier here. I imagine a lot of these will be very similar, and really, yes, looking at the next one. So the next question was, how important do you think integrity is? And pretty much a similar answer. So most people said 5, a few people said 4. And then next, looking at honesty. All right, again, similar answer, 5 and 4s. And let's see if we'll get a shift as we go down. It's pretty similar for good communicator. And oh, here's where we got a little, and this was the one that I thought we'd see a little bit different. So how important is creativity? So here we go. So but 29% said 5, very important. 43 said 4, 25% said 3. So kind of right in the middle. And then I bet we'll see probably a similar answer for accountability. So it seems like most of the, 5 of the 6 traits were pretty solid, where most people thought they were important, but creativity, that was one that wasn't quite, is across the board as far as what people thought. So some interesting answers. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. If you want to go full screen on your presentation, you'll be able to take things away here. So I'll go ahead and turn my camera off, and I'll chime in as questions come into the Q&A box. A reminder, everyone, just go ahead and drop those in the Q&A. And from here, we'll let Carol-Ann take the reins.
Your surveys are, pretty standard of what most people say. And we do sometimes forget creativity and leadership is important, because if there's not creativity, they're not moving forward. You don't want to be stagnant. But I opened this with Doris Kearns Goodwin. If you don't know who she is, she's a presidential historian, but also a US historian. And she says, good leadership requires you to surround yourself with people of diverse perspectives who can disagree with you without a fear of retaliation. That is very important, because you want your leaders to be able to hear you. And as a follower, you want to and reflect on your job. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So why should leadership matter to domestic violence programs and others who work with domestic violence programs? Everyone is a leader. It doesn't matter where you're leading from. You are a leader, whether it's to your client, whether it's to your board of directors, whether it's even to, a CEO in corporate America or an executive director. Everyone is a leader. And we sometimes don't emphasize that enough. So that becomes really very important to recognize that. And as I said, you may be a leader of an organization, a group. And we're also going to talk about ways you can improve your leadership skills. Sometimes we forget to look at ourselves and how can we improve? What makes us different? What makes us better? As I was talking with Ashley and Hannah a little bit earlier, is that when I have my students do their evaluations on the course, I want to know what worked, what didn't work. And you want to know that as a leader so you can make changes, as well as you also want to know how to improve what you're doing. And so I've had students who have given wonderful suggestions, and we've changed improvements in courses as well. So one of the things that researchers all agree on is that to be a leader, you have to have a follower or followers. And so one doesn't exist without the other. I've given you a little tool, Mind Tools, which allows you to go in and kind of take a look at leadership skills and what that looks like and how that's done. Take a look at it. It's free. In fact, all the links we're going to give you to test your skills are free. Just hit the link and go in, and you can get those. So we want to talk about the 5 traits of successful leaders. Being confident and positive. If you're not confident, if you're not positive, it's really hard to inspire and empower people. One of the things that becomes really kind of difficult is when you're new. So you walk into a new group and organization as a leader, a little bit of self-doubt, a little bit of overwhelming feelings come over. And so it becomes really important to look at that. Go in with confidence. You're there because somebody thought you could do the job. Emotionally intelligent leaders stay in control. Don't get angry. Don't get frustrated. Don't yell and scream at your followers or your employees. It doesn't make for a very conducive workplace. But one of the things too is that I need to stay in control to really think clearly about what's happening and what's going on. And that becomes really important in, being able to succeed. Next slide. Transformational leaders motivate. You have to find a way of getting your followers, your employees, whoever, to feel motivated about what they do. Becomes really important to understand their skills, what it looks like, what they do well, what they don't do well. And we all have weaknesses. We have to be honest with ourselves. We all have weaknesses in our leadership abilities, but how do you motivate the best out of people? Successful leaders walk the talk. You have to absolutely show to your followers that you do what is necessary. Marvin Ellison, who is CEO of Lowe's, one of the things I love about his story is that every once in a while, he puts on that, vest of Lowe's and goes down to the floor and works with the employees. He says he wants to remember where he came from. He wants to remember how hard is that job being on the front line. And he wants to see what's working and what isn't working. So feedback from employees and followers is great. Sometimes you need to just get out there and do a hands-on and see what is or is not working and how effective is it. So really important to do that. Effective leaders help their people shine. You really, truly want to be able to do the little things to make your people shine, whether it's a thank you. I'm sure Marvin Ellison, when he walks through Lowe's and he's on the floor, he goes, "Good job." Means a lot when you do that. Little things motivate people. We sometimes forget that thank you, that good job, that I appreciate what you did, goes a long way. If we overlooked that, we're devaluing the people who are with us. And you can't lead if your followers aren't going to follow. So really important to remember to highlight what they do and who they are. Next slide. Leaders don't care who gets the credit. They really, truly don't. True leaders let their team or their individual members take the credit because they did it. There's a number of PowerPoints that I use in my domestic violence class, and they have somebody else's name on them because they were created by somebody else. And they did a really wonderful, excellent job. One example is one of my students was doing her internship at Metro. For those who don't know, it's one of the major transportation systems in Los Angeles. And she looked through their entire employee handbook, and there wasn't anything on domestic violence in the workplace. So she asked if she could create the policy. Her supervisor said yes. She did such a great job that they wanted to take it up to the Metro board to make a decision and approve it. And so her supervisor said, "You created it, you do it." It was such a great PowerPoint. I told her that I was taking it to use in class, but her name is on it. I didn't create it. So you have to let people who do the work get the credit. Next slide. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can't do this job as a leader in this day and age without looking at diversity, looking at equality, looking at inclusion. You have to really take into consideration what does that mean? What does that look like? In fact, research has shown that the more diversity you have on the team, the more successful they are. So really you want to look at that. And equity is shown to be a driving force for leadership, being able to propel and move teams forward. And also you need to understand the skills of your team members. This is why I was talking about, even Marvin Ellison, because if you're out there looking and seeing what they're doing and how they're doing it, you get an idea of their skill sets. And you also want to look at equity being one of those that gives everybody an equal chance on a team. And keep in mind, team members, some are going to have more talents than others, some have different talents. All of that is going to make your team successful if you utilize that. But it really becomes important to make sure your team is really across the board successful in inclusion. And we're going to talk more about inclusion and what that looks like even in corporate America sometimes, which doesn't always happen. All right. So what does it mean to be a leader with impact? Because one of the things you want to look at, do leaders make an impact? Do they make a difference? And people can tell you the leader who made a change in their life. They saw something in that person and allowed them to come forth with their talent and be really successful. And you want to look at also the difference that they make. What was the difference that they make? That they gave somebody a chance, that they believed in somebody. And you also want to look at who are your examples. One of mine is, you may not know who she is, but Lady Astor, who actually was born in America, and became the first American woman to be in the House of Commons in Parliament in England. Absolutely forward thinking, and the ability in her day and age to be a woman in politics and a leader took a lot of fortitude. So you want to find your examples of good leaders. Remembering people's name is also important. Who's on your team? One of the things Strack and Casey Gwynn started the Family Justice Centers. They had actually a team of 32 people because of 32 different agencies. And I thought, gotta remember all 32 names. And that's not always easy to do when you have a team in an organization that big. Being a leader means being of influence. So your influence on people makes an impact. And what you're doing is investing in them. And they need to know that. You need to tell them. You need to let them know. You also need to know that in terms of the goal of your leader is also going to influence you. So look and see how leaders convey to you information. What is the goal? Do you know the goal? Important to know that. And as I've talked about, it's not always the big things that make an impact. It's those little things of remembering somebody's name, of telling them thank you, that they did a good job. People remember those things. I'm always interested when I leave an organization or a job and nobody said thank you. I remember those as well. But I also remember the ones who felt that they got something from it. I have up here something called the greenhouse model. It was a project that was designed for seniors, and especially seniors with dementia. And the project, though, took into consideration culture. It looked at people's lives, it looked at their work, it looked at their family members, and they also included family to sit down with them to develop this. It's one of those where they were forward thinking, but they made sure everybody was on board. Same thing happened, if I recall, it was Wisconsin, when we were doing welfare reform, who decided to do actually sort of an integrated model of everybody at the table who would interact with this family, including the family. So we need to make sure that you're looking at who's impacted, but are they getting input? If you'd like to kind of take a look at discovery and delivery skills, this is another place you can go to click in and take the quiz and see where you fare and how your skills turn out. I will tell you all the links on here that you're getting to these are things I've used in my leadership class. And as I tell my students, I don't put anything out that I haven't done. So I've done these tests. I've looked at these tests, and all the interactive exercises I even use in my domestic violence course, I have done. So it becomes really important. All right, where's my, come on, there we go. So transformational leadership, authentic leadership, servant leadership are some of the styles we're going to look at. The number of leadership styles is varied based on the research you look at. So you might see some others that are included, some that are not on here, some that are, you'll look at a list and some of these won't be on there. So transformational leadership, these are highly effective leaders. They inspire, they encourage critical thinking, innovation. They allow people to actually come to them with ideas and they listen. Such examples are Winston Churchill and Steve Jobs, both highly effective, transformational. Steve Jobs was leading during a time, of course, of creativity, of launching, computer technology. Winston Churchill was leading during a time of crisis. Both of those are transformational in terms of what was happening at that time in their leadership. So transformational leaders really are someone who gets in there and they really look and communicate what's going on. Authentic leadership. These are leaders who build relationships with others. They're sort of people persons. They connect well with their followers. They're usually good listeners. They're willing to listen. They're willing to hear good ideas and different ideas. They want input from people with experience. One of the things I admired very greatly about John Kennedy was the fact that he didn't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, whether you were male, female, a person of color. Were you the right person for the job? And most of the time he was willing to listen because he felt you had the expertise he did not. That's what makes good leaders, the ability to put people in the right jobs, and listen to them. They're, one of the adages that comes from a friend of mine is you can tell who people are by the books they read and the people they surround themselves with. And I try and make sure the people around me are smarter than I am, have different abilities and talents than I do, because I learn. It pushes you. It makes you more effective. So one of the things to look at is also servant leadership. Hold on, jumping ahead of myself. So authentic leaders, I wanted to give you examples. Arne Sorensen, who is the former CEO of Marriott. He was the CEO at the time when Marriott was making lots of changes and acquiring other hotels and sort of moving up to the forefront. And then Jacinda Ardern, who's Prime Minister of New Zealand, during the COVID pandemic, stepped up, made sure the people didn't panic, let them know what was going on, and gave them as much information possible so they felt okay about what was happening. It's not easy to be a leader during a crisis. It is really difficult. And for many of you, you may remember, we're during Hurricane Katrina, leadership was non-existent. From the mayor of New Orleans to the governor of Louisiana to the president of the United States and the head of FEMA, everybody dropped the ball. So you have to be able to be that leader, not only in good times, but in crisis. So servant leadership, which is where a lot of people are in the helping profession, focus on building better organizations, wanting to create a better world, better places for people. They put people as the highest priority. They see that if having good people makes for, productivity, makes for better creativity and moving organizations forward. So examples of authentic leadership, Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. And I think we all probably can agree with those two. So social entrepreneurship is another form of leadership style. These are people who are very innovative. Market-based tools is what they use. They look at ways to solve social, environmental issues, things such as water crisis. And at the core, these are people who believe that all of us, including big business, have some sort of moral obligation to make the world a better place. And this actually comes from Drexel University's Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship, Barry Litsky. So not something that I looked at, but I think it's something important because social entrepreneurs are people who think outside the box, actually kind of go that extra mile to see what can be better. Examples are Elon Musk and Bill Gates. Elon Musk, he's looking for the next people transportation to space. No offense to anybody who's going, but I'll be on the ground waving at you. I don't plan on leaving planet Earth, but more power to those who do and see the ability of something out there as a vision. So transactional leadership, these are leaders actually kind of see corporate America and put corporate America first. They also look at culture as a high priority within the structure of the corporation. These are people who, and we've all probably had one, micromanage. They want to know every little detail that's going on. Had a boss once when I was working at Hughes Aircraft, and he'd put something on my desk. 5 minutes later, he'd come out and he'd say, "All right, is it finished?" And I'd say, "Is it on your desk?" He'd say, "No, then it's not finished." And he would do this repeatedly till finally one day I said, "You have to put it on my desk, go in your office and leave me alone. It will be there when it's finished." But that is micromanage. And when people micromanage you, it is difficult to do your work. Those are the times, sometimes you have to step up a little bit and push back. Don't push back too hard. As I tell my students, rock the boat, don't tip it over. Authoritarian leadership. These are literally people who don't take information from followers. They don't trust followers. They make all the decisions. And some examples, which you'll find really interesting, are John Kennedy and Martha Stewart, which I found interesting that these were given as examples, because John Kennedy usually took a lot of input. Now, he made the ultimate decision. Martha Stewart, on the other hand, former employees of her have said that she micromanaged. And that might be appropriate because it's her brand and her company, but sometimes it's really difficult to work under those conditions. You have to be really exceptional to work for them. Ashley.
Carolyn, I'm going to chime in here. We had a question come in, and maybe so the question was, is there a leadership style that combines all or some, or maybe the answer is that they're always kind of combining with each other? What would be your response to that?
It really depends on the individual. It also depends on what they're doing at the moment. Some people are brought in for crisis, and that's their job, and they move on. Other people are brought in for organizational change, which of course disrupts everybody and drives everybody a little crazy. Usually you're not going to find somebody who does all of these. They're going to have one or two. Most of us have one style in particular, but some may have two and three. Some are really good at understanding their role on that moment and can make a transition to a different type of leadership style. It's why when we get to the end, I have one slide recommending a book called Strength-Based Leadership. And in it, there's a little code. It's only good for you. And you can go in and take multiple quizzes that they have and find out your strengths and weaknesses, because that's really what determines a good leader, is understanding your strengths and your weaknesses. When do I need to rely on somebody else because I don't have that ability? But most of us have pretty much one style of leadership. And so I'd love to say there's somebody who embodies all of them, but there isn't. There isn't, but it's a good question.
That's very helpful to know.
So you can't talk about teams and followers if you don't talk about group dynamics, collaboration, and teamwork. And usually what you get in terms of dynamics are teams are doing tasks and maintenance. And we're going to talk about what maintenance means. So you have to look at what is your team doing? How well do they get along? What are they working on? So you have to be aware of group functions. And one of those is what you do here is you divide your operations into task and maintenance. Tasks are usually the functions needed to achieve the goals. So what is it I need to get there? And the maintenance is the group cohesiveness, a sense of community, that they work together well, that they enjoy working together, that, you'll find some, usually good camaraderie. They're joking while they're working. That's okay. If they're getting the job done, don't worry if they're joking. Sometimes we all sort of lean a little more, we're having too much fun and we forget what we're doing. But overall, they actually are very cohesive at what they're doing. And all of these, by the way, are learned skills. You can learn about doing the task and doing the maintenance functions. It takes time and practice, but that's why you look up to the leaders you admire, because there's a sense of who they are that is, inherent for you. You like who they are, you like how they come across, whether it's even a TV interview, but don't rely on the interview. Go to the research, find out about them, find out about their backgrounds. It's one of the things that I'm always doing is leaders that I admire. Who are they? Where do they come from? How did they get there? What were their steps and their goals to achieve where they are? And learn their techniques. You can learn their techniques. A lot of the links we're giving you today allow you to go in, test what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Then you can decide on how to make a change. You can decide then on the ability to go in and learn that skill or refine it or make it better. You can't do a team without collaboration. You have to understand what it is to collaborate. And we're going to talk about turf issues because those will come up. Been there, done that. I'm not ashamed to say it, but it's like sort of embarrassing, but we've all done it. We've all had turf wars with somebody that we worked with. So collaborative leadership means maintaining a process that includes everyone involved in the issue or the organization. That's why staff meetings become very important. You need to know at least once a week what's been happening through the week for each person who's there. Was there a difficult client? Was there a difficult task? Or something that, sort of made you step back and go, whoa, what am I doing here? So you have to look at that. You also have to know that you need to give the team a sense of ownership. After all, this is their product. You might be overseeing it, but they're the ones doing it. So you need to make sure that they have a commitment and they understand the purpose. And they understand why the implementation sometimes is important. We all have deadlines, and sometimes those deadlines come up faster than others, and you're kind of looking down the barrel of the train coming at you going, okay, we need to finish. And it's going to create some strain within your team, and you need to know how to manage that. You really want to get a sense of when do we need to sit down? When do we need to talk? More than once a week, because sometimes you might have a crisis that you really need to sort of foster and figure out where to go. Members of collaborative groups are more likely to take responsibility for what they're doing. It's their buy-in. There's a bottom line for all of us when we do a lot of the work we do. What's in it for me? Some of it is that self-helping, seeing victims become survivors and go on to productive life, seeing somebody who even is, a juvenile delinquent, make that change and go down that other road and that other path. But at the same time, we need to step up and take responsibility when it didn't work. And sometimes that's hard. The other way you get collaboration is building trust. Every team member needs to trust every other team member, and you need to trust your team members. If you're not trusting your team members, then they're going to know that, they're going to understand it, and work productivity can be, slightly on a downturn. You are going to have turf issues. You are going to have people who don't agree or get along, or they might even agree about what the job is and how to get it accomplished. So one of the things you want to look at is sitting down with the people involved, what happened, what's everybody's version of the story. And I always recommend initially doing those separately. Get everybody's version of the story before you bring them together. Then bring them together, because once they start to talk, sometimes you'll discover both sides are slightly right, both sides are slightly wrong, and the truth lies in the middle. And you also don't take sides, don't play favorites. If one employee knows that you sort of like them a little better than the other employee, they may try and use that to their advantage. You need to be neutral. You need to be Switzerland, sitting in the middle, not taking sides until you hear everything and you understand. Find the common ground and then manage to work it out. And in doing that, one of the things that you're going to find is that you are not going to be popular with everybody. Ashley, I love it
for you. You mentioned in the spirit of collaboration, you mentioned having staff meetings. Is there a specific frequency at which you think staff meetings should be held to kind of keep people in the loop and make sure that everyone's on the same page?
I think it depends on the workload. There are some organizations where you have weekly staff meetings. I know when we were doing welfare reform, we had weekly staff meetings. So we had just a kind of an idea of what was getting done, what wasn't getting done, where were the deadlines? And in that sense, we had to sometimes reprioritize. I know a lot of domestic violence shelters try and have weekly staff meetings to just get an idea of where are the clients, what's going on. Is there a kind of a roadblock for a client and being able to get some resources and services? Some staff, when I worked at Hughes Aircraft, we met every other week. The managers met weekly, but the whole staff met every other week. And then some may not need to have a meeting, but maybe once a month. It really depends on the organization, depends on the workload, depends on your deadlines. And so you'll know that, you know your organization better than anybody else, and you'll know what seems to work the best. Good question. Keep those questions
Great
coming.
answer. Thank you.
Okay, so also in terms of doing teamwork, foster honest and open communication. One of the things that becomes really important is many times organization will take retreats. It has to be very, very clear. One of two things needs to happen. Either the team leader is not there, so people can feel that they're open and honest, although a lot of times the information will get back to the team leader, or the team leader needs to understand if they're there, whatever is said is in confidence, do not retaliate. They're trying to be open and honest, not only because of how they're feeling about the organization and the work that's being involved, but sometimes they're letting you know as a leader that they think you're slightly falling down on the job. And you need to absolutely make it very clear there is no retaliation. It's hard sometimes to hold them to that. We did a team retreat once with an organization I was working at, and we specifically asked that our team leader not be there. She was not happy about that, but everybody felt they could not trust their team leader not to retaliate. And so that's also where you have to be open and honest. And it can be a little difficult and hard and scary. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not. But it's one of the things you have to look at and sort of move along. Create collaborative goals. You know, when you have the ability to include your team members, wow, many times you're going to find, excuse me, they thrive. They're included, they're giving you ideas that can be really creative. And sometimes, though, keep in mind, even the best leader may not always make a difference. Sometimes if you've got creative differences, if you've got turf wars to the best of your ability, you sometimes may not be able to work those out. And it becomes really important to recognize that. Sometimes then you need to bring somebody else in, whether it's a mediator, somebody higher up than you are. You may need to really, take a hard look at the fact that no matter what you've done, it's not working. That's hard, that's difficult. Celebrate their success, however. Let them know that they literally were absolutely awesome. Celebrate small victories. It's what I tell my students who work with domestic violence victims. You've given them a list of 5 things to complete in this next week. If they complete one, celebrate it. If the team met a deadline, celebrate it. Doesn't have to be elaborate, just that you call them in together and or bring coffee, for the day, bring coffee in for them, and something that recognizes what they've done. So they really, truly have an understanding that they're valued. Really important. All right, so allow team members to problem solve. I can't stress that enough. Sometimes as leaders, we have a tendency, we step in too soon. Let the team solve the problem. Let them brainstorm, come up with solutions. Now, you want them to run their solutions by you and the problem by you, but let them solve it. You do need to sort of follow your instincts. If you think that they're getting stuck and you might need to assist, don't solve it for them. Just have them run ideas by you as a team, and then kind of look at directing them. You could take this direction, you could take that direction, let them come up with the solution. And also by letting them do that, you give them empowerment. They get creative. You'd be surprised what people come up with when they're allowed to do that. It gives them a sense of confidence. The team goes, wow, look at what we did. And it gives them ownership because now they really, truly are a part of the whole project that needed to be accomplished. Provide adequate resources and training. Sometimes we don't provide enough training for all of us, whether we're leaders or followers, employees, even for clients. Sometimes we need to admit that I need more training. I need to advance. even though I've been with the School of Social Work for 17 and a half years, I still attend webinars. In fact, I intend to be on the October 14th on stalking. It's why I went and I took the certification course on strangulation prevention. Always make sure you're adding to your skills, advancing, your technology, advancing, your understanding of an issue, so that you're not kind of sitting on the sidelines and wondering why you didn't promote it, why you didn't get to go to that next level. So really make sure that your team members get the resources they need to do their job and they get adequate training. Keep yourself accountable. It's one of those where we have a tendency of, I don't make mistakes, I'm the leader. We all make mistakes. It happens. In fact, Ashley will tell you this morning, I was still refining my PowerPoint and sending a new one saying, scrap the others, here's this one. I found typos and things. So we all overlook it and do things. And projects never run smoothly, I can guarantee you. Somewhere there's always a glitch. But when it happens, take responsibility. If it's yours, take responsibility for the team. There's always somebody higher up that we all answer to. Let them know it happened. We'll correct it. We'll do the best we can to make it right. And then move forward. Once you've done it, forget it, move on. Don't throw your team under the bus. I know we all have team leaders that have thrown us under the bus. It's never pleasant because they didn't step up and take responsibility and admit that they did. So don't throw your team members under the bus, because I can guarantee you it will come back to bite you. Understand your day-to-day operations, what it takes to get those jobs done. And also know as a leader, it's all a balancing act. When there's mistakes, when there's not mistakes, when to sort of celebrate the small victories, and when you need to kind of take somebody to task. It is a balancing act, and it's not an easy balancing act, but keep your eye on the prize. If you know what the end goal is, that's what you're aiming for. The small stuff in between is the small stuff in between. As you've all heard, don't sweat the small stuff. Ashley.
Back. Another great question coming in. So as a leader, how would you go about asking for constructive criticism from your team?
Directly, just ask. Do a staff meeting. It may be impromptu of, I'd really like to have a quick staff meeting. What's working? What isn't working? Is there anything we're missing? Do you not have all the resources that you need? Just ask. We sometimes forget it's okay to just directly ask. I think in this day and age, we're all a little afraid to ask. Don't be afraid. It's one of the things of confidence of being a leader. You're not afraid to ask them, and you're not afraid to accept the criticism. And so be prepared. Remember, though, if you open the door, they are going to walk through it. But just ask. It goes back a little bit to the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally. It might feel personal, but it's not. I recommend the book if you've not read it, The 4 Agreements. It's about 50 pages. Don't take anything personally, because what you're being told is not always a reflection of you. It's a reflection of the person asking or telling or criticizing. So don't take it personally, but look and see, how valid is it? Do I need to make some changes? One of the other things is in the 4 agreements, don't make assumptions. Never make assumptions. And we all know what happens when you make assumptions, and we're usually wrong. So just ask, literally just ask. Yeah. It may be scary, it may be difficult, but ask.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for the questions. I love this. Show some empathy. If you have not been in that job or that position, sometimes showing empathy can be difficult. Somebody was posting on one of my groups the other day about somebody gotten angry at a waitress. They felt service wasn't fast enough. Well, she can only do her job, or he, based on how fast the chef in the kitchen gets things done. Show a little empathy. These are jobs that are difficult and hard. I have the ability to say, in my high school, I worked as a waitress, worked weekends, worked summers. I know how hard that job is. It's why even if I don't get the best of service, I still give a good tip. Being a maid, we overlook people who are on the front lines as servants. So waitresses, maids, sky caps at airports, anybody who's on those front lines, show a little empathy, because we don't know the day that they're going through. Important, your team members may be having a really bad day, got the kids out the door late, the kids didn't want to eat breakfast this morning, you had a fight with your spouse or your partner. Have a little empathy, because if you're showing a little bit of kindness, it's amazing how far that will go. Build a strong one-on-one relationship. Have individual meetings with your team members. How's everything going for them? Everything okay? You also get to know their skills. They look at you in terms of the fact that you care. And also it gives them an opportunity to tell you their goals. Ask them what are their goals, because one of the things is, where do they want to go? Most of us don't want to stay in the job that we're in. We might want to stay in the industry, but you want to kind of move up. And if you don't, that's okay too. There are some people who really don't. I had a student who said, I always want to be a frontline worker working with clients. Great. Celebrate that as well. But if we don't sit down one-on-one, we're not going to know. And if you are the follower and somebody sits down with you as a leader and says, what are your goals? Where do you want to go? Have them. Be sure that you've got them in mind. From time to time, write them down. From time to time, check on them. Is this happening? Is this not happening? And also do the research. Sometimes you might need to do research of, how do I get from here to there? If you're in law enforcement, what does it take to go to be sergeant? Well, there's certain requirements you have to do and an exam you have to do. You need to know that. So understand what it takes from your point of view to get to the next level, let alone tell the leader. And if you're the leader, listen carefully. And how can you help? How can you assist them in doing that? Build respect. As we've all heard, in order to get respect, you have to give respect. Respect your team members. If you respect them, most of them, and I say most of them because not everybody's going to respect you, but most of them will, they're going to respect you. And leading by example is one of the ways you do that. Marvin Ellison, he, walks the talk. He knows what it's like to be on that floor as a Lowe's employee, and he reminds himself every once in a while to do that. So be an example. Have team members walk away if they move on, that you were an example of a good leader. Communications. None of this happens unless we communicate. Communicate relentlessly, over and over and over and over. Simply be direct. One of the things that is interesting is every time I write an article or I do something, I have a couple of friends who do editing, and they'll say, I don't understand what this sentence means. And I think, well, it was perfectly clear when I wrote it. Sometimes what you think is direct is not. Have somebody who's willing to kind of look at things and run things by you. One of the terms I learned working at Hughes Aircraft was dry run. Practice. I ran over this morning and did practice, and that's when I found some typos and things. So be direct, but be as direct as you can be. And sometimes you'd be surprised what happens when you are direct. Listen and encourage. Really, truly listen. Many employees will tell you that they never feel listened to by the person who's supervising them or is their team leader. It's like when I get to the end of a class and my students zone out because they're tired after 2.5 hours. I recognize it. We sometimes leave class a little early. They've checked out. You know what that looks like. So if you're the leader, listen, encourage them, accept their input with gratitude. You might not accept it. You might not think it's a great idea, but accept it with some gratitude because it took a lot of courage for them to do that. Illustrate through stories. As you've seen, I've been giving you stories throughout of leaders and what that looks like. Part of it is because we all learn differently. I'm somebody who is very visual. Don't tell me how to play a card game. Do a couple of hands with me so I can see. If you tell me, it really just goes over my head. So I need to see it. And affirm with actions. You need to lead by example. If you're not going to lead by example, they're going to think, well, you want us to do this, this, and this, but you're not there either. So sometimes you have to really make sure you're stepping up with your actions. Excuse me, Ashley.
I'm back. We have 3 questions that came in, so we'll go ahead and check in with those. And just a reminder, we're here at about a little bit less than 30 minutes left, so we'll take that into consideration as well. So the first question is, so how do you motivate team members to be more productive without micromanaging if leading by example has not worked? What would you suggest someone could do next?
Call them into your office, sit down and say, what's the problem? It may be something personal at home that's really weighing on their mind. It could be they truly just hate their job and they're in the wrong profession. Figure out with them how to get them more motivated. But you don't know if you don't ask. So sit down, ask them what's going on. Why is there an issue? Why is there difficulty? Sometimes what you might have is somebody who might appear to really kind of be doing their job, but they're late every day. Why are they late every day? So sit down and ask them and try and then work with them to sort of motivate them. And sometimes ask them, what would motivate you to feel more productive in doing this job? Maybe they've never received training or received adequate training. So becomes really important. I know when I first started to teach at USC, the vice dean who hired me, she would sit with all of us once a month as brand new faculty and taught us how to deal with difficult students, how to appropriately grade our papers, and if there were personal issues that were coming up in the classroom. So you need to sometimes find out what's going on for them.
That's great. Very helpful. Next question is, how would you address a team member who consistently fails to complete tasks for an assigned meeting? And maybe this is kind of tied into the previous question, but any other wisdom to add to that?
Well, besides asking, you may have to reassign them. Sometimes the tough task of being a leader is reassigning somebody. This may be somebody who really, truly doesn't want to do this job. And unconsciously, usually unconsciously, they're sabotaging themselves, the team, and you as a leader. So you need to think about reassigning them. If you have to reassign them, where can you reassign them? Because you don't want to reassign them and have them become somebody else's problem with the same problem. So you need to think very carefully. If you have to reassign them, where would you? It's a tough job to do, but you've got to do it. On more than one occasion, I've actually had to fire people. It's not pleasant, but do it with as much compassion as possible.
Yeah, very helpful. So how often, you mentioned one-on-one individual meetings. We talked about staff meetings, but what about one-on-one individual meetings? How frequently would you suggest those being held?
Every couple of months. It doesn't have to be, every month, but every few months. You want to just check in with them. If you're brand new, this is when you want to sit down one-on-one for sure. What do they think are their good skills? What do they think that their weaknesses? Take note of that. And then every few months, check in with them about things improving, because maybe we're able to give them training. You were able to give them some information that maybe they didn't have before. So just kind of casually check in from time to time. It doesn't have to be, every month. Just check in.
Very good. We do have some more questions that came in, but I'm going to let you kind of dive back in, do a few more slides, and then we'll come back in here with
Yes,
more
let me
questions.
jump through here. Gender gap in leadership, we need to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to let you all read this. The little numbers in the back are references from where I got this. And when you get the slides, there is a link. You can get to the full article and piece about it. But we have to talk about the gender gap, where women are in terms of leadership and what that looks like. There in this report, it was broken down by professions. You know, in the legal profession, 45% of associates are women, but only 22.7% are partners and 19% are equity partners. Same holds true in medicine. As we progress in the workforce, women are not at those higher levels. And in the financial industry, if you look at that last line, it says, but they, meaning women, are only 12.5% of chief financial officers in Fortune 500 companies. We are not sitting at the board. Of course, as one of my favorite quotes, and now I can't remember, I think it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg says, if you're not invited to the table, bring your own chair. And I always have said, be there, be at the table if you have to work your way through. Same thing true in politics. If you look down of what this looks like, of, you know, who's in Congress, who are governors, who are mayors, and then you factor in women of color. It's not equity out there yet, folks. We're still not achieving those higher levels. Becomes really important to look at. So in 1980, there were no women in top executive ranks of the Fortune 100. In 2001, 11%. And in Hollywood, women still lack power. In fact, as of 2017, women accounted for just 18% of all directors, executive producers, writers, editors on the top 250 domestic films. And believe it or not, it's not gotten a whole lot better. And women of color are almost non-existent in those positions. So there's still a long way to go. Achieving parity. It is estimated for women to get equal pay about 100 years. Right now, when about 50 years ago, when I was starting in the workforce, so it gives you an idea of age, it was 69 cents on every dollar a man made. It's 81, we've moved up, still not there. And race makes a difference. If you look at women of color, Black women earn 97 cents for every dollar by a white man with the same qualifications and job. It was one of the reasons we fought for affirmative action, but corporate America found a way around that. Corporate America said, you didn't put in the word qualified. So what they did is they did a checklist. Female of color, person of color. And so they found a way around it. The web link is on here at the bottom on this slide if you want to see the full report about what that looks like. Can't do leadership without conflict resolution. You are going to have conflict, and it's not just between members. You may have conflict with other leaders and supervisors. Act responsibly. Diagnose the conflict. What is it? Maintain boundaries. You know, don't cross the line and lose your temper. Don't cross the line and name call. I have sat in meetings with managers in aerospace where everybody's going at each other. And I sit back kind of going, okay, this is really wonderful and marvelous, but not leadership. Respect differences. The old adage, you can agree to disagree, and do it respectfully. And identify a goal. When you kind of think you've got a resolution, what is the goal that we came up with to resolve this issue, and then move forward. Make sure you put it into practice, you look at it, and you do that. Can't do this without talking about burnout. Really, truly can't. So all of you know this, but I'm going to repeat it. Lack of energy, lack of motivation, constantly tired and exhausted. Loss of control of moods, temper, lack of enthusiasm. So I'm quickly going to tell you my little story when I was a consultant for LA County. We were on a 2-year contract. This is when we were doing welfare reform. About a year and a half into the contract, I get up in the morning. I felt great. I drive to work. And in Los Angeles, I could drive surface streets to get to work, didn't have to do the freeway traffic. As soon as I would pull into the building, I would have a headache. And I thought, I left home feeling perfectly fine. I don't get this. It took me a couple of months, one day sitting at my desk, picked up a pile of papers, and I went, okay, moved them to the other side of my desk, and I went, okay. And all of a sudden, this light bulb went on. And I thought, all you did was move the papers from one side of the desk to the other. There's a problem here. And my headache would leave the building and realized I was burned out. There were 15 of us who did this project together, 15 consultants. All 15 of us at a year and a half were experiencing burnout. They called us in one by one to say they were not going to renew our contract at the end of the term. And you could hear every one of us laughing, saying, we didn't intend to renew our contract. What made it difficult is we were micromanaged. We were treated as employees, not consultants. We had to come into the office, and being the rebel rouser that I am, the supervisor would say, you have to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, I'm not an employee, I'm a consultant. And I'd come in at 9 o'clock, would drive her crazy. And if you're going to give ultimatums to leaders, make sure you intend to follow it through without a problem. Because every time she would say, you have to be here at 8 o'clock, we gave you offices. I said, you hired me as a consultant. It means you should trust me to do my job no matter where I'm at. And I said, if you don't like it, fire me. And I was prepared for her to fire me, and she didn't. And so, of course, once you make that threat to somebody and they don't follow through, you kind of know you can get away with it. But be prepared for the consequences if you're going to do that. But it took me a long time to realize I was having burnout, which became really very, very important. I want to skip over quickly. You all know what you need to do to avoid burnout. Be kind to yourself, find ways to relax, avoid denial. Sometimes you may not recognize it, ask for help. But most of all, an exemplary leader is Angela Merkel. If you did not know, she is retiring after 16 years of being chancellor. One of the things that she was asked by a reporter, because she always shows up in a red suit, was, do you not own another suit? And she said, I'm not a fashion model. And if you see her in meetings, she is in different suits, but for the photos, she was always in her red suit. She gets only an $18,000 a month retirement benefit for having been chancellor. By the way, so does the president of the United States. Sounds like a lot, but $18,000 a month, depending on your lifestyle, may not totally work. She stayed living in the apartment that she and her husband have lived in for 30 some odd years. She did not live in the chancellor's residency. They did their own house cleaning. There's no maid service. They cooked their own meals. I mean, she really, truly exemplifies a leader who understood her role, what that looked like, what that meant. And as chancellor, she was in charge of the largest economy in Europe. So to me, this is an exemplary leader. Quickly, we have some references for you, some other quizzes you can take. There is Strength-Based Leadership is the book I talked about, and some resources for you and references. So, and other resources. Other questions, Ashley?
Yes. Thank you for all those resources. And just for anyone wondering, we'll share the slides. I already had uploaded them to Google Drive and put them in the chat, but we'll make sure that everyone has access to that so they can click on those links. Let's dive back into our questions. So the first one we have here is, how do you address regular lateness without seeming like a clock watcher?
Well, you sort of have to be in some respects, and it depends on how late they are. It depends on how well they respond. One of the things is I had a student who was constantly late for class by 10, 15 minutes. And finally, one day I said, can you tell me why you're always late for class? And his response was, because based on traffic, it doesn't matter what time I leave, I seem to always be late. And I said, okay, for your job in the future, you need to let somebody know that. Whether you send me a quick text saying, I'm just pulling into the parking lot, whatever. I said, because not to address it is disrespectful. And I said, walking in late when I'm already in the middle of a lecture feels disrespectful. And he was somebody I knew who really, truly wasn't disrespectful, but I wanted him to know if this were somebody else other than me, somebody could feel it is disrespectful.
Very good, helpful answer there. Next question is, my supervisor keeps telling me how great I am in my position, but I really want to advance in the company. Any advice for that? So looking at the other side of the coin, the person who is in, not in the leadership role themselves, but they want to be.
Tell your supervisor, what is it you want? Where do you want to go? Ask advice. What does it take for me to get there? Do you have recommendations? And if they say, well, I don't know, the hem and haw, go find somebody who'll work with you within the organization. And it's okay if you go talk to other people. That's not out of line. But find those who understand where you want to go and how to get there. And set out those goals and check with them from time to time. So if it's your supervisor who says, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z, go do them. Then come back and demonstrate that you've done them, whether it's showing a certificate, whether it's showing you took a class, let them know that you're working on it, because then they're going to give you more resources.
Excellent, thank you. Next question. So how do you suggest handling leaders who sabotage team members?
The best way you can. One of my former bosses threw me under the bus multiple times. I just had to roll with it. Because one of the things you don't want to do is burn bridges. You never know who you're going to run into and see again in your lifetime, especially if you stay in the same field. So being in the domestic violence field in academia, I can't afford to burn bridges. You unfortunately have to roll with it. Find somebody, though, who's a friend, family member that you can talk to and vent. Couple of colleagues who have retired from USC that I worked with heard me vent. They'd say, come in our office and vent. And I go, no, I'm not going to do it on school premises, but let's have a phone conversation later. So I could kind of vent to understand that it wasn't me. It's this person can't step up and take responsibility. And there's no way you're going to change that person's style. So unfortunately, you're going to have to roll with it and figure out how to kind of deal with your feelings of anger, frustration, and move on.
And perhaps at some point, really move on to a different role and yes. Make that decision that it's just not worth the fight.
Different agency or a different department within the agency.
Mm-hmm. Next question, do you have any tips for moving into a supervisor or management position? So if you're new to the role, this is the first time you've ever had one of these positions, obviously all of this information is helpful, but what would you say, where to start? Where should you look at first?
First of all, you're going to go in feeling scared. You're going to go in feeling overwhelmed, but go in knowing you earned that position. You're not there simply because you're related to the boss. Well, you could be, but most of the time you're not. You earned it. So on your first day, take a deep breath, have a sip of water, or a cup of coffee, sit down at your desk and kind of go, I've arrived. Applaud yourself for getting there. And then, let the team know, we're not having a meeting today. I just kind of want to get a feel of our day-to-day operations. And you might know them because you may have been within the organization moving up the ranks, but you still need to get a feel from the management position, the administrative position of what that's like. And then within a few days, call a staff meeting. Ask what they think has worked, what hasn't worked, where would they like to see improvements. Then a couple of weeks later, start to call them in one by one to get to know their skills. It gives you a lay of the land without feeling stressed, because you're going to get stressed enough in management positions and leadership without stressing yourself out on your first few weeks.
Very helpful advice. I like that, because it's a lot to handle stepping into that for the first time.
Yeah, first time I walked into the classroom, I had done trainings for 10, 15 years, but I walked into a classroom going, this is a different setting. And I'm going, okay. It was a little scary, but I had to take a deep breath knowing it was just another training.
Yeah. Just a reminder, everyone, if you have questions, please do put them in the Q&A box. We have, I think, 3 more queued up here and about 7 or so minutes left. So we'll keep rolling with the questions. The next one is, what are your tips for leading upwards or across an organization company, not only on your team? So how to kind of lead upwards, so, in other areas of the organization.
Some of it is a question of where you want to go. Do you want to be CEO, executive director? Or do you really, you like where you're at, but you'd like to go lead a different team because you want different skills? Talk to the person who's leading that other team. You might need to kind of start at the beginning and go into that team as a team member to work your way back up. Because you might not know everything that team's doing, but it looks like a great place to be. Or don't hesitate. I still do this after 17 and a half years at USC. I look at other college jobs. Who's out there with what? What are they teaching? And I sometimes don't want to use that term. Sometimes I appropriate a syllabus from somebody else's school. And to be honest, USC School of Social Work was the first school of social work in the country to do leadership as a course. But I now look at the leadership syllabus of another school, or I'll look at advocacy. So look at some other avenues that give you information. So that team over there, they look really good. Talk to the team members. Ask them what it's like to be on that team, because you might find out you really don't want to be there. Or you might find out, whoa, I really do want to be on that team. I really like what they're doing. So talk to people, give people an idea, even your team leader, that you'd like to sort of maybe look at another department and what does it take to do that. Just make sure you know where you want to go and why you want to go there.
Yeah, very helpful. Next question is, do you have any resource suggestions on how to organize roles within a team to provide clarity within the position? So who's responsible for what, and making sure that that's very clear?
Actually, I don't, but it's a good research project. These days, one of the things I love about technology is you can Google almost anything and find it instantaneously. I go back to the old days when we didn't have in-home computers and I had to be down at the library researching, on my own to do it. These days, Google in your question, you'd be surprised what comes up.
Very helpful. So next question is, I'm a member of the administrative team, but I'm left out of meetings that deal with things that I need to be in the loop on. Any suggestions?
Anybody on the team you can talk to of why you're left out? Sometimes you need to do a little snooping. Got to be a detective on this. Why are you being left out? Now, one of the tips I will give you when you're invited to a meeting is do what I call upset the apple cart. If you look around a room at a meeting, somebody sitting at the head, who's sitting around the person at the head? Usually it's somebody who is their confidant, somebody they work closely with. Down at the end are the people who are less important. So if you're one of the less important people, move towards the head of the table and upsets everybody. It's like, why is she sitting up here? I do that all the time. Would drive board of supervisors crazy. But it said, I want to move up. I want to know what's going on. So I'm interjecting myself. You might be uncomfortable because I've kind of rearranged the whole table setting. It's okay. They'll get over it. And also people usually who are on the outside, sometimes you've got too small of a room to accommodate everybody. Sometimes these are people who are staff people. You want to be sitting up by the head. So might need to do a little detective work of why you're not getting included and how long does it take if you're not included to get the information you need, and who's telling you the information you need.
Yeah, very helpful. I love that idea of sit where you want to be at the table, right? Not where you feel you should be. I like that. Next question is, do you have any experience with or advice for a shared leadership model? So for example, when there are 4 equal directors with specialized skills and departments, it can be tricky.
I would sort of politely demand that you meet weekly. You need to know what are the other departments doing, because they're impacting you and you're impacting them. And so to have weekly meetings to know where every department is standing, what they're doing and accomplishing that may impact what you're doing and vice versa, I would ask for a weekly meeting. Say, you know, we operate 4 different departments, but we all overlap and impact each. And personally, I would really be grateful if we could meet weekly, so I have an idea of how my staff is being impacted.
Yeah,
put it on you.
Very helpful. Yeah. How do you handle employees who won't hold themselves accountable even after multiple conversations? I'm sensing a trend here that we've got some people that may be spinning their wheels a little bit with some team members, and hopefully what we're providing today is some helpful guidance on that.
It's one of those where you may have to make tough decisions. Sometimes you may need to talk to your higher up about this employee, because if you've exhausted everything, maybe they have some other creative ideas, and maybe they're going to agree with you that maybe this person needs to be transferred somewhere else, or you might have to give them a different job within the team. And if you do that, it means you're probably somewhat displacing another team member. You may need to bring that team member in and explain, you know, we have some issues. It's not you. I need to make this change because this other person has some personal issues. Place it that way, because then you don't have to reveal anything about this other person. But you may need to talk to a higher up before you do those decisions.
Very helpful. Well, we're almost at our time, so we have a few more questions, and don't be shy if you have more questions as we're wrapping up, put them in the Q&A. We'll follow up with Carolyn and make sure that everything is answered. But wanted to just give you a chance to kind of wrap up and share anything, any final thoughts, any final advice to everyone attending today.
Don't hold yourself back. You are more talented than you give yourself credit for. Figure out where you want to go. And also, you don't have to stay in the same field. My students are probably in their mid-20s, some are in their early 30s. And, oh, social worker for 20, 30 years. And I go, you don't have to be in that profession. Your skills are transferable. You know, whether you're a stay-at-home mom just coming into the workforce, those skills are transferable, believe it or not. People downplay full-time moms. That's a full-time job. Your skills are transferable to other industries. You might need to slightly tailor make them and get a little more training, but it's all transferable. But know what you want to do. I'm getting actually ready to leave USC and sort of pursue more consulting work. And I thought, okay, what do I do? How do I do it? I have a social media director. He's saying you need to do X, Y, and Z to get exposure. You need to do this and this. I actually sat down with a stylist the other day and said, okay, I think I need probably a little bit of a makeover, because I'm going to be in a courtroom versus a classroom. It's a little different. And literally just kind of said, I can do this. And I was really surprised that in the last month, I've actually been working with a public defender on a homicide case where the victim killed her abuser. And I kind of went, well, that just came out of nowhere, but okay, here we go. And embrace it. If you're going to make the change, embrace it. Go at it with all of your entire energy. It's the only way you make the goals happen.
That's wonderful. Carolyn, thank you so much for all this great information. I really appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit of your wisdom on leadership. So with that, just a couple of reminders for everyone.
Ashley and Anna, thank you so much for not only inviting me, but guiding me through. So you were my leaders for this.
Well, we're all so happy to help, and it's been so wonderful working with you. But with that, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap things up. I do have a couple of reminders for attendees. So I mentioned a few times that our slides will be shared afterwards, as well as we'll edit this recording and send it out for everyone, so you can rewatch parts that you may want to rewatch or share with other members of your team. And then also we'll send a certificate of attendance and any resources and a transcript. We'll send that all out. If you're calling in, we don't have your email address, so please email us, info@domesticshelters.org, and we'll send everything to you that way. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Peterson. Thank you everyone for attending. And with that, we'll close things out. Have a great day. Bye-bye.